Show what police found when they pulled over a car near Steubenville, Ohio. Officers saw this car weaving. It almost hit a school bus. Inside, this is what they saw. Two adults who apparently overdosed on something. In the back seat, a 4-year-old boy.
We are following breaking news out of Virginia Beach tonight. 3 officers went to the hospital after becoming ill while responding to a call.
And now a hazmat crew is on this scene. 10 on your side's Liz Kilmer is there at an apartment complex on Sapphire Drive. So Liz, what are police saying at this point?
As you all know from personal experience, families, communities, and citizens across our country are currently dealing with the worst drug crisis in American history.
Emergency crews gave them several doses of Narcan, and police found some kind of pink powdery substance. They sent it to a lab.
Was taken to the hospital, and then 3 of the officers who responded reported feeling ill, and then they were also taken to the hospital. Now we're told those officers, they're okay. And they were released from the hospital, but you can see there are still a lot of crews here, fire crews, hazmat teams. They were called in to determine if there's any sort of foreign or dangerous substance here that may have caused those officers to feel sick.
This is a worldwide problem. This crisis of drug use, addiction, and overdose deaths in many years, it's just been so long in the making. Addressing it will require all of our effort, and it will require us to confront the crisis in all of its very real complexity. Last year, we lost at least 64,000 Americans to overdoses. That's 175 lost American lives per day.
So today was our full team hazmat drill for Virginia Beach. So in thinking about some of the current pressing topics out there, something new that we could exercise and learn about. Obviously fentanyl is becoming more and more frequent. We're running into it in various ways on our EMS calls and even sometimes in our hazmat responses, depending on how we find it. So we wanted to come together as a team, exercise our team, talk about how we were going to handle that, attack that, and also bring in other outside agencies that we knew we were going to respond to these types of calls with.
We have representatives from the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, we have DEA, we have FBI, we have Beach Police, and the Emergency Medical Services from the City of Virginia Beach. With this, we started off the scenario first thing this morning with an unconscious individual outside of a building, led into an engine company coming up in with EMS personnel and police to find out 2 or 3 more personnel inside the building that had succumbed to some type of reaction. The engine company started feeling some type of sickness, dizziness at this time. With this, they called for a full hazmat response, did an emergency decon with removing personnel outside the building. Through that, as we removed these individuals and transported them, we started hazmat operations with our other government agencies here to determine what was going on inside the building. It was determined after multiple level A entries that inside the building was a drug lab, basically with a concentration of fentanyl.
It has become so prevalent that the Drug Enforcement Agency has deemed that first responders and police officers should not be touching it. Don't sample the product, and what they do is they package it up and send it to a laboratory for testing. Because the fentanyl is being produced overseas in foreign countries, oversight is very minimal, if at all. And that way we cannot judge what the potency of the fentanyl that's coming into the U.S. and that's being used for illegal purposes. Nearly half the overdoses in 2016 that we suspected that involved heroin also involved fentanyl.
We've seen around the country in the last couple of years a huge increase of drug activity that is dealing with fentanyl. Fentanyl basically is an opiate that is mixed in with either a cocaine or a heroin dosage to give it more of a kick, as they would say. Fentanyl is basically a painkiller. It's 50 to 100 more times pain relief than morphine is, but it has a deadly dosage rate to it.
Fentanyl is being found in other substances also. It's being found in heroin, it's being found in methamphetamines, being found in cocaine, it's being found in over-the-counter medication. It's also being marketed as a fake oxycodone.
If you think of it as a couple grains of salt, 6 or 7 grains of salt, and you put that into fentanyl, 6 or 7 grains of fentanyl is actually a lethal dose. And what we're finding out is around the country now, multiple reports of different responders need to prepare for this, because this chemical can be airborne, it can be ingested, it can be inhaled, or it can be absorbed through the skin and cause side effects adverse to our first responders.
It can cause dizziness, it can cause respiratory distress, it can cause respiratory depression, and it can even get to the point where you can go into respiratory arrest.
Bring awareness to our EMS providers, our firefighters that are going into these houses, these structures where people may be actually processing, or what we call milling, fentanyl, to keep them aware and to give them things to look for as they're entering these structures. Once the fentanyl becomes airborne, for our first responders who are going in, whether it be an EMS call or for a fire call, they can become overwhelmed and actually become unconscious. So when we get dispatched in real life to these particular situations, we'll probably be dispatched to unconscious patients. So when you enter these structures, we're looking for different types of materials that may be out there, containers, whether it be Tupperware containers or glass jars or those types of things with any types of white powder. This process will become messy as they begin milling it, and it will actually be spread all over the place. We're looking for N95 masks that may be out there. We're looking for measuring utensils. We're looking for scoops, different types of bagging systems, scales. These are the things that we'll be looking for, or you should keep your eye out when you make these entries into these unconscious calls that just don't seem right.
When they're responding to these calls for unconscious and overdoses, is that they should suspect that fentanyl is related. Like I said earlier, that most of the heroin that we're coming in contact with does have fentanyl in it. So when you're going to these overdoses, make sure that you're aware of your surroundings, make sure that you have gloves on, make sure that you're not touching anything you shouldn't be touching. If you see any white powdery substances, make sure that you are not disturbing them. Once these particles become airborne, they're easily ingested or easily inhaled, and that's how most of these exposures are occurring.
When we're dealing out in the field in response to any type of possible drug overdose, unconscious, our officers and firefighters out there that are arriving first on the scenes have to do a great scene survey. We need to be aware of all the situation around us and possibility of that this might be a situation where there's a drug induced with fentanyl. Fentanyl has become very serious. We need to take precautions on it and sometimes take extended measures to deal with these patients that are possibly contaminated or the area we're going into contaminated.
Just like any other hazmat call or really the day-to-day EMS calls we run in people's homes is just keeping your eyes open, being aware of that full scene, not getting tunnel vision and focused in on just that patient, but that unconscious patient. Let's think about how they got there, any clues or any signs around the room, and really kind of slowing things down to figure out what's going on and get a better perspective of the hazard that you're dealing with.
If you suspect that you've come in contact with fentanyl, the appropriate thing to do is to make sure that you do gross decon, which is a flush, and then remove all your clothing, and then flush again, and then transport it to the hospital for treatment. Obviously, the treatment for fentanyl exposure or any opiate exposure is Narcan.
It's basically brought in our decon process and what we need to do, and with that, our emergency decon, that flush, strip, flush, would be that initial decon, and then also the call for a hazmat response.
Well, for this incident, our decon was a stage 2 decon, which was a 5-step, but for, I guess, the everyday provider on an EMS call, we would do an emergency decon for like something like a fentanyl exposure, which we're focusing on right here, which would be a flush strip flush. So you want to hand line off the engine, go ahead and flush that individual thoroughly. Then we want to get them out of whatever clothing that they were in, or strip them down and flush them again.
Right now, our process is to working with our other government agencies with us in hazard mitigation. We'll do a recon, kind of get an idea of what's going on. Once the recon is completed, we'll come back and discuss our options of what we think we have available. And going in with our police partners from the state and DEA to then collect for evidence and removal of product.
As far as working with these agencies, the only issue that we've come across is just not working with them enough. Like we work with the other cities, do a regional hazmat response. We do weekly, monthly training with these agencies, meaning the regional hazmat team, so that we can function well on these particular instances. But with the FBI and the DEA, we don't get to practice as much. So hopefully with this drill and us beginning to work together, we'll be able to set up more training times together, and it will become more fluid. So what we've basically learned is that our Virginia Beach Hazmat team will begin working in conjunction with these other federal agencies to assist not only with atmospheric monitoring of the situation, but also making sure that that scene is safe and assisting with any other types of procedures that they may need.
As we deal with this, and it gets, we get more cases and documented cases around the state and around the country here, is basically it's a serious awareness now that we might be dealing with something just more than a simple overdose or an unconscious person here. There might be some other reason that behind that case that we have to be careful for our responders so they don't be contaminated with it. Any questions you have, you can call any of the members of the hazmat team. We've got a lot of information we're getting around from the country, from our partners also, from the DEA, from the FBI, and the state police. We're all working together on this. I know there's a lot of different thought processes with it. We're trying to come up with the best for our city to work with and work with these agencies. One of the best things we work with today is just the contacts of the people we made. These are the people we'll be dealing with on these types of situations, and today we made some great contacts. Everybody was impressed of the way that the City of Virginia Beach Fire Department operates on our hazmat team, how efficient they are, how professional they are, and how knowledgeable they are, and they can see what we can do. And we also know what they have capable of being able to do. And with that, we can work together, train, and we can bring our strengths and weaknesses together. So we are in a real scene. We'll be able to make it a little bit easier for everybody to come up with a good ending to the situation.